Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you the steps involved in using Azure Stream Analytics to process your IoT device data from Azure IoT Hub. If you'd like to follow along, you will need an active Azure subscription. You can sign up for a free account at azure.microsoft.com. Let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is create a resource group in an Azure IoT Hub in our environment. So I've logged on to portal.azure.com and I've gone to my resource group area, and I'm going to create a resource group by clicking add here. And then now this is going to bring up a dialog box or a window that will allow me to enter in the details. So I'm going to use my current Azure subscription, and the name of my resource group is going to be IoT Hub-RG. I'm going to select Central US because that's closest to me. I won't put any tags. You can put tags on here in the next one, but I'm just going to say review and create. So clicking create will go ahead and create this resource group, and then when it's finished, I can go and click on this button here to go to the resource group. The next thing I need to do now is to create an Azure IoT Hub inside of my resource group. So you'll notice I don't have any resources right now. So in order to create a resource, I want to click this add button here at the top. And this will bring up a window allowing me to search the marketplace for the resource that I'm looking for. So I'm looking for Azure IoT Hub. So I'm going to type in IoT Hub, and you'll notice that some selections come up that I can select, and I'm going to pick IoT Hub. And then it brings this up this overview page that describes what it is, what plans you can get, and then links to documentation. So I'm going to click on the create button to start the process, and then now it's going to step me through the information I need to create my IoT Hub. So the basics tab here asks me for certain information about what I want for my IoT Hub. So the first thing is, what subscription do I want it to be under? I'm just going to leave it under this one. What resource group I want to put my IoT Hub created in. In this case, I'm going to leave it in IoT Hub-RG. You can create a new one right here if you'd like. It's going to ask you what region. I'm going to be keeping everything in Central because that's closest to me. So I'm going to select Central US, and then the name of the hub. So I'm going to call it Blog Demo Hub. And you'll notice that it validates here. So you're looking for this green check mark. Okay, when that's done, I can click on this next button to pick the size and scale. And you can see the size and scale asks you, what's the pricing tier that you want and the scale. I'm going to start, it defaults you to standard, and they have the different tiers here: standard 1 through 3, basic 1 through 3, and then the free tier. So I'm going to pick the free tier. Please be aware that you can only have one free tier in your subscription. So if you had one already, it would prompt you and say, hey, I can't create another one. But since I don't have one, it's okay. So I'm going to pick the free tier. The number of hub units is disabled because with the free tier you just have one. I can't get Azure Security Center with the free tier. I don't really need it for this. And then it just shows what's enabled and how many messages per day you get. The advanced settings, I can increase this for the device to cloud partitions, but I don't really need to. Clicking on next for the tags would just put me to some tags, take me to the page for tags, but I don't really need that either, so I'm going to go right to create, review and create. Now review and create just shows you a summary of the information that you selected, and then when you're ready, you click on create. And now you can see that your deployment is underway. This usually takes a few minutes, so I'm going to fast forward the video to when it's complete. So now you can see that the IoT Hub has been created, and I'm in my resource group here, and you can see that it's present there. So if I click on this, this takes me to the IoT Hub that we just created and giving some information, some overview information. So now the next thing we need to do is to register a device inside of this IoT Hub. Now there are a couple of different ways you can do this. The easiest way and the most manual way is to do it through the Azure portal. On the left side here under Explorers, you can click on this section called IoT devices. And what that's going to do is that's going to take you to a page that will show all the devices that are associated with this IoT Hub, and then it will allow you to create and register a new device against this hub. You would do that by clicking this new button, and what that'll do is that will allow you to type in a device ID, which is the name of your device, an authentication type, symmetric keys or X509 certificates, and then what the primary and secondary key values would be, and also whether it's automatically enabled to this IoT Hub or not. So I can type in things here like test device 1. I usually let it auto-generate the keys for me, and then I would hit the save button. So that's one way you can do it. Now the other way is to use the CLI, the Azure Command Line Interface, and that's through the Cloud Shell, and I'm going to show you how to do it this way as well. So when I click on the Cloud Shell, it's going to request the Cloud Shell and open up this window here. And you can see it authenticates to Azure and then puts me in my home directory. So now I can start typing in commands here, CLI commands to do things inside of Azure. In order to register a device for an IoT Hub, the command is AZ IoT Hub device-identity create. And it takes parameters, it takes a hub name parameter, and the name of our hub is blog demo hub, and it also takes a parameter device ID, and this is the name of your device. I'm going to call it test device 1, and then you hit enter. And now this doesn't take very long, but you can see now that it came back with a JSON string saying it was successful. And now if I go back to the portal here and hit refresh, you can see now that test device showed up. Test device 1 showed up in there, and there it is enabled. It enables it automatically. It uses a shared access signature, and it generates the keys automatically for you. Now finally, what we need to do is we also need to keep track of a few things, such as the device connection string for later on in this exercise. So I can go, if I click in the portal and click on the device, you can see I can see the device ID, the primary and secondary keys, as well as the primary and secondary connection strings, and I can copy those to the clipboard. That's not the way I'm going to do it, though. I'm going to use the CLI because there are a couple other things that I want to get. So the first thing is to get the connection string. So in order to show that, I want to type AZ IoT Hub device identity show connection string, and that takes a parameter of the hub name, blog demo hub, and then it takes another parameter called device ID, which is the name of your device, test device 1, and then I'm going to output it as a table just for readability. Okay, Okay, so then it shows the connection string, which is right here, and we want to save this off, this whole thing right here. So we're going to save that because we'll need it later. And we also need a couple other things as well. We also need the Event Hub's compatible endpoint, and to get that, you want to type in AZ IoT Hub show, and it takes a parameter query. And now to get the endpoint, it's properties dot event hub endpoints dot events dot endpoint. And so when you see Event Hub endpoints, just be aware that IoT Hub is just a specialized event hub, so that's why it says that. So you're just basically getting the endpoint, and then you want to give it, and then it takes another parameter of the name, which is your IoT Hub name. So log demo dash hub. Okay, so that returns your event hub endpoint, which we'll want to keep that as well. I want to save that off. We also need the event hub's compatible path, so we need a path. And that's going to be, it's events, instead of events.endpoint, it's events.path. And everything else is the same. So that's going to give me the path. So I'm going to save that off as well. And then finally, I want to see the service primary key from my IoT Hub. And that is done by typing in AZ IoT Hub policy show name service query primary key, and then the hub name, log demo hub. And you can see now that's the primary key for the service policy. Now I could have gotten that service policy from the IoT Hub in Azure by going to shared access policies, clicking on service because this is the service policy, and then looking at the primary key, and you'll notice that it is the same RAOPL. So it is the same. So I could have got it that way as well. Okay, so the next step is to actually get some code for your devices. We're going to be using a simulated device through the Azure IoT samples to get off of GitHub. So if you go to github.com/Azure samples /Azure IoT samples C#, you can clone or download the zip file for this. So these are the samples, the IoT samples for C#. And if you look, once you download that and you look under IoT Hub Quick Starts, there are a couple of samples here that we're going to use. So simulating device is the first one that we're going to use. So if we go into that and then open up this simulated device CS file, which I have here. So in the simulated device.cs file, what we need to do here is we need to replace the connection string with my device connection string that we saved earlier. So let me do that and then save it. And then, okay, so that's really all we need to do for that. And then what you can do to compile and run this is bring up a terminal or command prompt window, which I have right here. And then go to the directory that CS file is in, and then type in .NET Restore, and then .NET Run. And now you can see that it's sending the telemetry to the IoT hub at this point. So I can leave this running. I'm going to stop it for right now, but I can leave this running, and this is actually sending the data to Azure IoT Hub. Now, one other thing I did for this is I modified this code to add a device ID, which basically is just generating a random GUID and sending it in the message that's sent. So I just added this here, and then what it does is it serializes it and then sends it off. So this basically is sending the device ID, the temperature, and the humidity simulated values, and that's what you can see here. Now, there's also another project inside of the Azure samples here. If I go back one, there's this project, this sample project called Read D2C, Device to Cloud Messages. So I can come in here and I can modify this CS file so that we can use this. So if I go back to Visual Studio Code, you can see I have Read Device to Cloud Messages open. And now some of the things that we've saved off earlier, we're going to need. So like the Event Hub compatible endpoint is right here. So I want to update that with what I saved earlier for that. Okay, so I'm going to do that. The Event Hub compatible name. And then the shared access key value for the service. And there you can see the key name is still service. So, and I'm going to save this. So basically what you're doing here is you're pointing this at your IoT hub so that it can read the device to cloud messages coming through. And this is a great way to check whether or not your device data is coming through. So once I have that done, you can open up another command window and navigate out to that quick start directory and do a .NET Restore and then a .NET Run. And now you'll see that it's just going to sit here and wait for messages to show up. So it's listening now. And since I turned this off, it's not going to do anything. But if I run it again, now you're going to see, now you can start seeing some of the messages coming through, and they do match. Okay, so now the next step is, since we're going to be taking this data, this device data that's incoming, we want to store it somewhere. And in our example here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to store it in a Cosmos DB database. The next step then would be to create a Cosmos DB database instance. So I'm in my resource group again, and I'm going to click Add again. And this time I'm going to type in Cosmos DB. And you can see here it says Azure Cosmos DB. So I'm going to select that. It takes us to our overview page that tells you what it is and the documentation links. But I'm going to click on Create here, and that's going to start me out. And again, it starts me out with some information that I need to enter. So starting with the basics, it's going to ask me what subscription I want it in, what resource group I want it in. Again, I can create a new one if I wanted to, but I'm just going to keep it in the one I have. And now it's going to ask for the name of my instance. And I'm going to call it Cosmos DB Test. Now notice this has to be globally unique, so that's not available. So I'll say JHA. There, the green check mark shows that that's available. It allows you to select an API, so you'll notice that there are different APIs that you can use with this, such as MongoDB and Azure Table and Graphs. I'm just going to stick with Core. And then some of the preview things like notebooks we're not going to touch on, so we'll just leave these the way they are. The location, again, I want to put it at Central, but now it's not offered in Central, but it's offered in South Central, so I'm going to get it as close as I can to where I am. Production or non-production for the account type. I'm just going to leave it at non-production since this is just a test. I don't need multi-region rights, so I'll leave that as it is. And then I'm going to go click the next button for networking. Now, network connectivity will allow you to select whether or not it's accessible to all your networks or if it's public or private. So I'm just going to leave this the way it is. I'm not going to do any tags, so I'm just going to click on review and create. So on the review and create screen, it validates that you entered in things correctly and will give you a success or failure. But then in my case, it says it's successful, so it's ready to create it. So I'm going to click on create here. And now you can see that it takes you to the page that shows that my deployment is underway. Again, this does take a few minutes to provision, so I'm going to fast forward the video to when it's done. Okay, so now the Cosmos DB instance has been created, and here I'm back at my resource group, and you can see that Cosmos DB test JHA is there. So if I click into it, you can see that it's been created. Now the other thing I need to do, which I'm going to need when I create my Stream Analytics job, is I need to pick a container inside of here. So I need to create a container. So the easiest way that I know to do it is to click on Data Explorer, which really gives you a nice kind of like a tree view view of the items inside your database. And then on the top here you can say new container or new database. So I'm going to click on new container, and it opens up this blade to add a container. And it's going to ask you for a new database right away. So I'm going to create a new one since I can do it all in one shot. I'm going to call it container namespace. I'll leave the throughput at the minimum since this is just a test, but the throughput will allow you to increase your RUs on it. And then I need the container ID, which is basically just the name of the container, and I'll call it test container one, and then a partition key. So the partition key will help identify the records in a certain partition. I'm just going to use a device ID since that's going to correspond to the GUID that I'm generating in the simulated data, and then hit OK. And what then this will do is this will create the container in Cosmos so that I can specify it when I create my Stream Analytics job. So it takes a few seconds, and now you can see that there's my database called container namespace, and I can expand this out. There's my container. And if I expand that, you can see settings and items and a few other things. But if I click on items, you'll see that there are no records here right now. We'll come back to this and we'll hopefully see some records here of the data coming in when we hook up everything. But right now it's empty. So now that I have my IoT Hub and my Cosmos database resources created, I'm ready now to create my Stream Analytics job. So here I am back in the resource group, and I'm going to click on Add, and now I'm going to type in Stream Analytics here and select Stream Analytics job, which will then display the overview page with the documentation and what it is. And to start, I'm going to click this Create button. So this then will ask me for the name of the job. So this is what you're going to call your Stream Analytics job. I'm just going to call it Test SA Job. I'm specifying the subscription it's in, the resource group that it's in, which is going to be the same, the location. I want to select Central, and then the hosting environment. So now the hosting environment is important because you either have choices of either cloud or edge. So if you select cloud, which is what we're going to select, that's going to put it out in the Azure portal. If you're working with IoT Edge devices, you can click on Edge here, and that's going to allow you to deploy the job to an on-premise IoT Edge gateway device. So we're not going to do that. So we'll just leave it at cloud. And then the streaming units specify the pool of computation when processing the queries. So the higher this number, the more resources it's going to use. So it defaults to 3, we'll just leave it at 3. And then we'll click the create button to create the job. And again, you can see that the deployment is underway, and this doesn't take very long. You can see now that it says the deployment is complete, so I can go right to the resource. And here it takes me right to the overview page of the Stream Analytics job. So now that we've created our Stream Analytics job, we need to configure it so that it takes the data, the incoming device data, and processes it into our Cosmos database. So you'll notice here in the job topology, there are a few items here. So the 3 things that you need when configuring a Stream Analytics job is you need one or more inputs, one or more outputs, and a query. So if I click on inputs here, we're going to configure our input. And that takes me to a page here that shows the inputs that I have currently configured in the system, which is none. So on the top, you'll see I can add, there are 2 types of inputs. There are stream inputs and reference inputs. So stream inputs are inputs for like incoming telemetry data from an IoT hub. So this is the stream of data that you want to process. Reference inputs are like lookup tables, so supporting information. So you can have a reference input, say to a blob storage location, or maybe a SQL database. So you can see that there are those 2 there. Now we're not going to do that in this case, but that allows you to define inputs, and then you can use the queries to join that data. So it depends on how complex your queries are going to be. So ours is going to be pretty simple. So I just want to add a stream input. You can see here that I can select either Event Hub, IoT Hub, or Blob Storage. I'm going to select IoT Hub, which opens up this blade, and it asks you for an alias name. So I'm going to call this Test IoT Hub Input. Now you can provide your settings manually, or you can select from one of your subscriptions. So I usually just pick one for my subscription, so I'll leave that like that. And then you're picking your subscription, the name of your IoT hub, so it's a drop down here, blog demo hub. Now the endpoints, if you have any custom endpoints, they would show up here. Otherwise, I'm just going to use the messaging endpoint. It's also going to default to the shared access policy name of IoT Hub owner, and you can see that it automatically puts in the shared access policy key. I can change this to something else if I like, but for our example, I'll just leave it like that. And then there are other entries like consumer group, how you want it serialized, what the encoding is, and if there's any compression. I'm going to leave all of these at their default values, and then when I'm done, I'm going to hit save. And you can see now that it's added the input, and it does a quick test to make sure that it can connect to it successfully. You should expect a successful test, and if you had problems, it would tell you. So you can see here now that it shows up in our input as a test. A test IoT Hub input is a stream. And then if I click on that, I can go back to that. So that's the only input that we're doing for our example here. So now I want to do an output. And again, this page is very similar. It's going to show you all the outputs that are configured in the Stream Analytics job. I want to click on Add here to add a new one, and you'll notice now that there are a number of different selections that you can add. There's an Event Hub, you can add a SQL database, blob storage, table storage, Service Bus Queue or topics, Power BI, Cosmos, Data Lake, Storage Gen 1, and even an Azure function. So we're not going to get into all of these, but we're going to pick Cosmos DB because that's what we created earlier. So again, it opens up a blade to ask you some information. I'm going to call this test SA, or test Cosmos DB output. It's going to ask you for the subscription if you leave it like that, which I will. The account ID. So this is your Cosmos DB instance. It automatically puts in the key for you. Now you can create a new database here if you'd like, but since I did this earlier, I'm just going to say use existing and select container namespace. That's the database that I called it. I need to give it the name of my container, and that was test container 1, and then the document ID, which was device ID. Oops. And once I enter this, I hit save. And again, it's going to add the output and it's going to test it to make sure that it can connect to it properly. And there you can see the successful connection test. Okay, so now once I have my inputs and my outputs defined, I need to create a query. And what the query does is it basically takes the input and you can do some transformation on it, and then it sends it to the output that you have defined for your Stream Analytics job. So if I click on query, it takes me to a page here that starts you out with a default query. And this is very SQL-like. So you can see it's a select star into, and then you have your aliases here. It's going to list out your aliases. I have one, test IoT Hub input, but it also says I have this one called your input alias, which this is just what it starts you out with. And same with outputs. So what I want to do here is I want to change this query to say, I want to select everything and put it into my output, which is test Cosmos DB output. And you'll notice now that that default one goes away, but it recognizes that that's wiring it up to that. And same with the inputs, I want it to be test IoT hub input. Okay. So at its very basic level, I can just say select star into. I'm going to save this, which will save the query. And then now I can test this query, but you'll notice now, before I test this query, there are some input preview results here. The reason why these are showing up is because when I had those command windows open for the generating the device telemetry, our simulated device, this was sending it to IoT Hub. And since we wired up our input to be our IoT Hub input, it's looking at the messages that are waiting to be processed there, and it's giving me a preview of what's there or what it's going to process. So this is a good way to determine whether or not you have data to come in and what it looks like. You can see here I have a device ID, which is just a GUID, and then temperature and humidity. And what I can do, instead of saying select star, I can say select device ID, temperature, humidity. I don't have to take all of these if I don't want them stored in my output, which is Cosmos database. So I can type in, just like you would in SQL, the fields that you want. For demo's sake, I'm just going to leave it at star. I can test the query by clicking on this, and what it will do is it'll take that input preview, the data from that, and it will do a test on it. And it usually takes a few seconds, but it's basically testing the validity of the query. And you can see here now that it processed 34 rows, and this is what it comes out with. And it said it was successful. Now it doesn't actually put it into our output, but it's just testing it. Okay, so now once I have the query completed and tested, I'm ready to turn on our Stream Analytics job. And I do that by clicking on the Start button here. And it's going to ask me whether or not I want to do it now or at some time. I'll just say now. And what it's doing now is it's starting the job. Usually takes a few seconds. And once it's done doing that, you're going to see that it changes its status here to running, unless it had a problem starting, which in our case it shouldn't. Usually when it has problems running, starting, it's usually because your query is not correct or there's something wrong, with it. Okay, so now you can see that the Stream Analytics job has started, and it says my job is running. Now, in order to get this working end to end, I need to go back to the command prompt window that I have and start my simulated device again. So I'm going to do that now, and you can see the messages coming through. And it usually takes a few minutes before you start seeing results from this. And one way to look at, so if I wait for a few minutes, I can do a refresh on this page, and you're going to start seeing something show up here in the monitoring and the resource utilization graphs on the front on this overview page. I can also go to the activity log, which it'll give me the last 6 hours here. If I go, let's just say the last hour. You can see here now that it's saying start job. It ran. A lot of times, if you have problems with the Stream Analytics job not working correctly, you can come into this activity log and look for problems. So one of the common problems that I've run into is that maybe in your query, you forgot to add a field. So let's say we didn't add the device ID field in here, which is required for your Cosmos database, since that's the partition key. You would get an error from this saying, hey, I don't have that, I need that. And that would show up in the activity log, as well as you'd see a little warning symbol here under your outputs to say that something went wrong. But we don't have that in this particular case, so I think we're good. Now you see that we're starting to get some data in here, and it's saying 52 input events were recorded, and then 51 output events with 0 runtimes, and the resource utilization is starting to tick up. So this looks like it's doing something. So now if I go back to our Cosmos DB instance and click on Data Explorer, I can expand our container and look at the items. And voila, now you can see that there is some data showing up here. And if I click on one of these, it's going to show me the information here. So you can see it's got a device ID. Here's the temperature. Here's the humidity. And then I also have other information that it's coming in since I did a select star. So the process time, the queue time, and so on and so forth. So this shows that the database is recording the data from Stream Analytics. Okay, so today we've shown you how to use Stream Analytics to process incoming IoT device telemetry data through IoT Hub into a Cosmos DB database. I hope this video was informative. If you have comments, leave them in the comments section below. And if you like this video, please click the like button. For more videos like this, click the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.